So yes, hi everybody. I'm Carol. I'm in the Orem office full-time clinical um, mental health therapist and CFLE and a couple other certifications. So CFLE is Certified Family Life Educator. That was my undergrad, one of my things there. So I really have, started to really enjoy these because it forces me to look at my books again. I think I went through 4 different books. I listened to 2 different ones all the way through that I've never listened to again, because they're my favorite authors. I just haven't gone that far into them. And so finding the newest, latest information on addictive behavior. So this is not going to be about just drugs. This is going to be about dopamine and other things, but will definitely refer to behavior in that way and how that works and what dependency is, and a little bit of a new look at this because we've as I'll read a couple passages from a couple books of, we've had a set agenda about what addiction looks like, what dependency looks like, what drugs look like, what all that is, and hopefully we're going to be open-minded and see the difference of opinions, yes, but really science. This is, if y'all know me, the books and the science and the research, and there might be some things in here that you've never heard of before, and hopefully some things that you have, and that you can go further with that. That's the point of all this, is I put these together. Here's some books, here's some references, but you take it further if you need to. So we're going to go over stats, definitions, of course. Do drugs cause addiction? We're going to go over that. And we're going to hit the rat park. So if you have not heard of that, it is I didn't even reference that YouTube talk about that, but Johann Hari talks about this in several of his books, and also of course Gabor Maté brings it up in his book. So the pre-existing vulnerabilities to addictive behavior. We're going to talk about of course I have to bring in 6 stages of change, because it's one of my favorite models. I did treatment for over 5 years to hundreds and hundreds of people through the court system, and I would teach them their weekly, nightly classes and substance abuse treatment. And that's where all this started from, is where I really could, really study what really makes someone change, or what drugs, alcohol, what the dependency is, all these things, right? So a little bit more about treatment. I will touch on dopamine. I will touch on how to help one of your family members a little bit, and we can discuss at the end about that a little bit, like what are we seeing there. I'm waiting for statistics after COVID, right? We know that there's several workshops I've done post COVID stuff that's like, yeah, we don't have the real statistics yet, because it just takes years, sometimes years, a couple of years to really get something out to see where our numbers really are. But we know that substances has increased use, behavior, dissociation, all kinds of things, road rage, all these things have increased. So we know that since we got out of COVID. And it's not just the only thing that's happened. As I talk about lost connections, of course, from Johann Hari, you're going to see some of that. And that's not even his addiction book, but Lost Connections is one of my favorite books that he did a while back. And the last one that he just did was stolen focus. So we're going to talk about that stolen focus. Yeah. So a little bit of stats. So I'm not going to read through all these. These are just, so when you guys get the PowerPoint, you can see them. But the thing is yes, we have issues with, these are drug, alcohol related stuff, right? And in general, just really try to generalize it to just addictive behavior or dependency. So, and it's not just drugs. So this is just one slide, right? So we're having a lot more alcohol related accidents. Of course, we're having a lot more overdoses than ever before. That struggle with alcohol abuse, 7%, compared to 5% of the general population. Vets are just more susceptible to that for sure. I just thought it was interesting that right now, like 2022, these are from the most recent stats. Like, I just thought West Virginia, that's interesting. They've got the highest rate of overdose deaths right now. So, and let me add anyone else in there that needs to be let in. Okay, so once again, like Heather said, chat if you have a question, if you want to just ask a question, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it, and then go ahead and chat anything, and we'll keep this going. So another little cocaine, right? 2023, 35% went from 2020 to 2021, a record high and the sharpest year-to-year increase since 2016. So that's just one thing. It's like, we know that this is, it's definitely, things have gone up, right? So let those people in. So let's see. I think those, I don't know, Heather, did more people need to be let in? It's showing. So this is just another little visual, right? So of course, if you haven't heard, okay, here's the opiate epidemic. And by the way, Glenn, that's an expert in this, is giving a workshop next week on that. So he's just going to focus on the opiate part. Heroin goes up and down, here's cocaine, here's meth. Here's fentanyl. This little orangish line, right? So, and we will be talking about gaming. So just in general, it's in general. So any kind of dopamine behavior, which we're going to talk about. So not just drugs, but yes, we'll be talking about that. So this is just another little visual of like, okay, we've got definitely marijuana as the highest use of drugs. So here's some gaming. Let me look at some of these with you. Okay. So the thing is this is just in general, but really this is what's going on. So you can think about any behavior that is repetitive that you continually do. And we're gonna go over all that in a second. But this is the DSM. Thinking about the game all the time, feeling bad when you can't play. It was proposed for the DSM. Let me correct that. It was not put in the DSM 5 years ago to the DSM-5. So this is what was proposed. So this is what's going on though. And I guarantee you when the DSM comes out again, I almost guarantee it, there's going to be something that goes in there, because this is where we found impairments, right? So feeling bad when you can't play, you need to spend more time. I can't quit or even play less. So reduction of behavior. So it's just a behavior, right? not wanting to do other things. We talk about this constantly with clients and younger kids, and most of them are 8 to 10 to 12 that are really struggling with this. So playing despite these problems. So the point that I have a list later of the 4 reasons why we continually do something, even though we have impairments and even though we have problems and lying to people. I've had this come into my office many, many times. I mean, getting up at 6 a.m., 3 a.m., stealing, the devices to get to gaming. First thing in the morning, they have to, we've got a serious gaming issue that's causing moods and feelings, and we're not eating, we're not going to the bathroom sometimes, right? So this is in there. So the thing is I have a simple workshop on this. It's called Technology and Families. So please watch that if that's the why you're here, right? So here's a behavior, but really just put this to any kind of behavior, anything. So you're having problems and you continue to do this. You can't reduce the problem. You can't reduce the behavior. So those are the big indicators there, right? Okay, so some definitions. So impaired control, okay? We have to know what that is. That's the biggest, one of the biggest definitions. So a craving or strong urge. So when I did a lot of substance abuse and urges, any kind of thing, it's not just substance abuse, it's an urge to, right, be aggressive, to be angry, to seek power, to go at something, right? It's an urge to do. The desire or failed attempts to cut down is not happening. It's a failed attempt over and over and over again. Impaired function, of course, is daily tasks. So this is interrupting our daily tasks. Social problems, failure to complete tasks, school, work, home, social, all of them. Usually, we want it, there's usually in all categories. It's like, oh, well, we do okay at work or school, but the rest of our balance is completely off. Risky use, impaired problems, despite the consequences. That's the thing, is here's risky behavior again. We don't get the natural consequences, or we don't get the consequence, so we continue. So of course there's high risk behavior in substance abuse that we talk about, of like, oh, so repeat offenders, we call it, right? So repeat DUI offenders is who I work with a lot. So it's like, okay, despite knowing there's a problem the first time, the second time, the third time, it's a felony. So avoidance, keeping away from something for a period of time that impairs other functioning, connection, or emotion. So connection. So this is my tip that I give out right now. This means avoidance is 2 hours plus. For a child, it's 1 hour. So if we're avoiding things, eating, doing our homework, doing normal functioning, even just Netflixing, right? And we just like go into this function of every weekend or whenever that happens. And so 1 hour for a child, 2 hours for an adult. Anything over that, it's now an avoidance. So 10 minutes to 2 hours is my rule, which is not my rule, but science's rule of the brain is distracted, and that's okay. If you're past 2 hours for an adult, we're now in avoidance stage of the brain, which is dissociation. We disassociate, or we dissociate to that. You know what I mean? So just remember that definition of avoidance, keeping things, connection, impairment of emotions. We're keeping away from things that we really like, normal functioning, right? So decide what that is with that time frame. So withdrawals, the combination of physical and mental effects, for sure. Dependency, physical mental dependency brings on tolerance and withdrawals. So I don't know if I can't remember if I define tolerance, but tolerance, is you need more of it to get the dopamine reach, the dopamine level. We'll talk about dopamine in a second. Dopamine Nation is like one of my favorite books, and I have it referenced in the back of this, but I've listened to that I didn't even add that to my listening again because I've already listened to it. So dependency, tolerance of dopamine. So you need more dopamine to get to the reach. Okay. Substance dependence, dependence use disorder is now medical term for addiction. So it's SUD, substance use disorder, is what it's called. Okay. And that's called substance dependence. That means you're dependent. Okay. Addiction. Changed behavior caused by the brain changes from the continued substance use. Now, that is different, right, than this. I mean, continued use changes the brain for sure. We know that THC, cannabis, pot, whatever you want to call it, I've got a whole list of all the other names for it, shrinks gray matter in the brain after 3 months of use. Well, we also know that after 3 months of quitting THC, cannabis, your gray matter grows back. It literally grows back. So relapse, returning to behavior illness after impairment, has formed. Returning to a behavior after improvement has been formed. So we are going to talk about the 6 stages of change because that's the really, really most important thing to understand, is what relapse really is. And most of the time, you're going to define relapse. So if I have a Dr. Pepper, if I quit Dr. Pepper, I use this one, or sugar, which I've tried to do both several times, and I have been successful to my goals. Or so if I say I'm going to reduce and I'm only going to have a Dr. Pepper, every 2 weeks, that's not a relapse. When I have a Dr. Pepper or sugar or something, right? So it's like, So you have to understand, after improvement, where you have completely cut off the behavior, and we're going to talk about the time frame on that, and then you relapse. It can be 3 months, and it can be 10 years. It can be 20 years, and the habit returns. Okay, dopamine, just so we understand what dopamine, real important, real fast here. 2 main pathways from the bottom of the brain goes into your mood, craving, mindset, behavior, excitement, everything. Everyone has a different baseline of dopamine, okay? It lowers and peaks, okay? So think about an athlete and their baseline down here and their peak of dopamine and how they stay in flow. And that's a whole other story, right? But how does someone stay in this nice motivation of dopamine when they are running a race and they're in this really peak dopamine level? Okay. Now, when the race is over, right? Or when something brings you back down to baseline. Now, if you stay up there and run the race for a really long time, even a marathon, but say, so I was a run, so I was using visuals of stuff. So here's a 100-yard dash and here's a marathon, right? And so you have to stay in there, right? You have to stay in this flow, whether it's really short or really long. And so where's your baseline when you drop them? So think of what we need: more behavior, more behavior, more behavior, more behavior to get to that baseline, more adrenaline, more dopamine. But if we don't sync and are bored, it's literally a boredom. Do you see what's wrong with what's happened? Is we don't allow ourselves to get to baseline very much, which is severe boredom, which is just dropping. And so we have to go back down and then bring our baseline and our peak, and I'm just visualizing this if you can't see me, with my hands, but this is where we have to bring that down a little bit. And we have to train the brain for those molecules that are seeking that peak all the time. And because it's pleasure, it's seeking all the time. And so dopamine not only acts as a reward, but also plays a role in the encoding of the reward memories and the stimuli. So this is super, super important, because if we want to change addictive behavior that takes us to peak all the time, we have to get out of the memory and the stimuli of what's connected to the reward system. It is not the actual thing, whatever that thing is. It's the leading up to it that brings our dopamine up, and oh, we gotta go up to that peak. Okay, energy and fear, energy, fear, energy, fear. So large surges of dopamine teach the brain to seek and repeat the experience at the expense of other healthier goals and activities. If you want to watch more on this, one of my favorites, of course, is I listen to Huberman Lab. He's a neuroscientist. He has podcasts. He's on everything. You can go from YouTube to whatever you want to listen to him on. And I wrote that on the bottom of this PowerPoint, episodes 53, 50, 39, and 33. Those are so far several of his episodes that his podcast that talk about these kind of things. And he talks about Dopamine Nation, which is a book. Okay, so this is our basic definition of the basic drug. So this is just like, yeah, this is what science and government and, the internet tells us that drugs, so drugs are not just, it really is. Here's drugs, but here's the drug definition, right? This reward, stress, and self-control changes in the brain circuits. Okay, that's what we've been told. Yes. And then here's the process of the neurotransmitters, such as marijuana, heroin, can activate those neurons because the chemical structure mimics what the natural neurotransmitter would do in the body. Okay, naturally. So this is what naturally does. And then here's a drug of any kind. And don't just think of drugs as chemical. A drug can be a lot of different things that mimic the same thing in the brain. So the release of abnormal large amounts of natural neurotransmitters are prevented, and the normal cycling of these brain chemicals get interfered. Okay, they get interfered. So an opiate, an Advil, my natural body is like, oh, I'm inflamed, I need Advil. And so what do? Take Advil. So it helps. So it interferes the transmission of my own body getting rid of inflammation, because there's lots of inflammation in our world, by the way. So, which is a lot of inflammation that causes a lot of issues. So it's like, oh yeah, Advil works. Okay, so it interrupts something, right? And so if I continuously every day, right, use something, I use this with, you can with anything, it interrupts that. Doesn't mean you don't use Advil, but if you use this on a continuous basis, you see what happens with marijuana or drugs or heroin or food or gaming or any kind of reward, stress, and self-control issues there. Okay. And so back to the basic is like, it's a brain disorder because it involves the function that changes those circuits. Okay, so what we're going to define today is a lot further than that. We can't just call dependency or addiction a brain disorder anymore. We just can't. Okay, just trust me, go with me with this. So dependency is a complex interaction. Okay, so yes, and you know me, yes, we're going to teach you some of these things so you understand first, and then we will get to, okay, now I want to change my behavior. But if you don't understand how this works, you will fail at changing your behavior, because scientifically you will fail. It's a very, 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 but there's hope, and there's ways to change a simple behavior. There really is. And a lot of you are probably going, well, I've got lots of family members, and I got kiddos, and I got people that are impaired. Their impaired control is is totally just not there. They don't give a crap about the consequences in relapse. And yeah, that's, I hear it. That's where I see it. I know it's like, okay. But it's an interaction between humans and their environment. And this is the issue. They all share the brain circuit, any kind of dependency. They all share anything that you compulsively do shares the brain circuit and the brain chemicals. And so it's like, wait, oh, there's no consequences to this. I'm not going to get caught. I'm not lying. I don't care what it is. So we say, okay, I'm going to continuously compulse this behavior, and I have an impaired control over the behavior. I have intense cravings to lie. I have intense issues about getting in trouble, and I don't really want to get in trouble, and I'm just going to keep relapsing. I mean, it can be anything. So the mood is modified. Tolerance is a problem. Withdrawal is a problem. Conflict and relapse. They all have to be in there. You can't just have a withdrawal and call it dependency. We used to be able, we were used to be told that, whatever I'm trying to say there, we were told that it was just, you're going to withdraw from a drug or a behavior. And then, if you have withdrawal symptoms, then that means you are dependent. That's part of it. Okay. That's part of it. So, because people can go off a drug and have withdrawal symptoms, but okay, so I'm going to use lots of examples with this, and not have a relapse problem. They don't have conflict with that. They don't have tolerance issues, and their mood wasn't modified. So that means they weren't dependent, but they did have withdrawal symptoms. You're going to have withdrawal symptoms. Okay. That's a given on most things. That's usually 100%. Like, we're going to have withdrawal symptoms if we quit something, but all the rest isn't there. Okay. Okay. So any questions so far? Let's see. I think we're okay. So the new definition, okay. Addiction is not what you think it is. So it's a social dislocation. Okay. So I have all these books referenced, so don't worry about it. I have pictures of them. I have them referenced in the back also. So one of them is the Alcoholism and the Addiction Cure. So remember, it's just addiction cure. Just, don't think of like, oh, it's just, I don't have any problem with alcohol. Okay, well, it's not about that. It's not all about that. It's really not. So this is Chris Prentice, one of my favorite authors, just my authors. This guy is another favorite author. Gabor Maté is referenced in here as one of my favorite authors lately. I'm addicted. All dependency is a symptom, not a problem. Okay, it's a symptom. It's not a problem. Addictive behavior is used to cope with problems. It is. These are all true. It is not necessary to blame genetics. True. We've been told that, and that's been totally bumped. It along with so many other mental health stuff, because there's real reasons for this and why I can say that. So, let's see. Let's talk about this. So, the 4 causes of dependency, in this book by Chris Prentice, he talks about this, and he's worked in a clinic and ran a clinic for dozens and dozens of years. I think at this point, 30 years. So chemical imbalances and stress hormones and dopamine. These are scientists, these are doctors, these are people that have, done lots of research too, and they wrote books on them. But so cause of dependency, unresolved events from the past, definitely. Belief systems and thinking errors. I just, kind of summarized that one a little bit. So the reason why we have dependency is we can't cope with the current conditions. Okay. So we could go into that one. We could go into all three of the, I could talk for 5 hours on just these 4 different situations, right? So we have stress and hormones and dopamine, right? It is a chemical imbalance, but it's not a genetic chemical imbalance. Okay. So one person will have, this, an allergy, and one, so this is how Wilson and Smith and described it, as they described alcoholism as an allergy of the body. Okay. It was back in the day, 1874 and 1935, when 2 people pioneered, AA, right? It was a wonderful thing to eliminate and discard the concept of the sinner. They replaced it with an equality, degrading the concept of alcohol, and the alcoholism. But it's like, okay, so wait, let's like, you're not a sinner, or here's a moral code, and here is a medical disorder, right? A disease, a neurological or neurobiological disease. So that's a little bit of background. I can't go into it. It's really deep. So of course, much more than that, but it's like, okay, so AA did a wonderful thing in eliminating the degrading concept of a sinner. They replaced it with equally degrading concept of the alcoholic. So it's like, okay, so we have a label, right? Okay. AA has its points and has good points to that, but it's not how we can look at the brain and dependency, because there's so many other things. One person will, genetically, have this, and one person won't. What does that mean? Well, that's these 4 over here. It's stressors, it's belief systems, it's the combination of your environment, it's the inability to cope with the stress or the environment of the current situation or the conditions, right? So yeah. And the other one is, this is the example that I'm going to give you. So there is, so like a poor thyroid condition, okay, that leads to some malfunctions, okay, because I talk about cell, and I'm a certified integrated medicine provider for mental health. So I go through a lot of this stuff with my clients. And so here's the imbalance, right? The genetics. Okay, here's the imbalance. Okay, is that because of genetics, or is that because of other things are not going through? Okay, so go back to the poor thyroid condition. Just say you have a thyroid condition, and the tendencies of how that is played out will make a difference in how you resolve and how you have a chemical imbalance in that hormone, in those, so one person would have this and one person would have that, right? So anyways, in the genetic tendencies to cause dependency, it's just not there scientifically. Okay. So for example, the other example is, okay, so first they have tendencies of, while they are say we have a predisposition to our ancestors, to our genetics, okay, that we've been kind of told, right? So our ancestors were dependent. Say there was someone in your family that was dependent on something, right? Alcohol doesn't cause them to be this. Alcohol does not cause them to be dependent, just like food doesn't cause someone to be way obese. It's not the food. Do you see what I'm saying? But yeah, sober, drink socially. Some people can eat and not get obese, and some people can drink socially and not be dependent. So and that's in all kinds of genetics, but it doesn't happen. So the rat park. So this is why it bunks a lot of genetic stuff too. So for example, in the rat park. We have Gabriel Métis that writes about this too, and he is a MD that has worked with tons of addiction. But here's the trauma, right? It's not what happens to you, but what happened inside of you. I'm a trauma-focused therapist. It's so true. It's impossible to understand addiction without asking the addict, it was like, what led you to the not having hope, or to going into the stress, responsive trauma? There's definitely lack of attachment and connection. There's just no doubt. The myth of normal goes into that with the toxic environment. But Johann Hari, Cheese and Scream, he goes over every point of all of these things. So just some food for thought there. The more you stress people, the more pain they will continue. That actually is proven in a lot of other countries of how they, so with that, of course, stressors. You can think about what happens with people that get in trouble with drugs and alcohol, and the stressors that they go through. So it's not just biological, it's not chemical, not neural, psychological, mental, social, emotional, political, economically, and spiritually. It has all areas of all of those balances, all those areas, right? So what can we learn, and how do we go into long-lasting change? Well, this is one few little steps here. So learning from each relapse. So say you decided to do something, and and you set your goals, and then there was a relapse. Let me go back. Rat park. So rat park. So let me go back. Someone asked a question in the chat about rat park. So look it up. It's in the books, but there is one little I guess I don't know if it's a TED talk, but yeah, by Johann Hari. He talks about this, or you can watch it for just several minutes. Okay, so let's go back to the rat park. Let me find my little reference to the rat park. So long story short, they put a whole bunch of rats. Here's rat park. They gave the rats lots of room to play and things to play on, and lots of little, jungle gym kind of things, and gave them plenty of space, and they gave them each other. So there was 16 to 20 rats of both sexes in the residence, the rat park at once. Okay. 200 times square footage, 200 times the square footage of the standard laboratory cage. Okay. A few little points here. As we see over and over again, they did this. Dr. Alexander, let's see, 1981 and 1980. Yeah, it was reported as social isolation and powerlessness and stress cause extreme conditions for the rats, of course. And guess who? They put the rats in that side of the cage that didn't have 200 times the square footage of a standard cage. And of course, you can guess, if you've heard of this before, a lot of people have, that the rats that were distressed and in a cage by themselves would not stop sucking down basically, cocaine water, but it was morphine. The rats in the park held very little attention to the morphine. And so they just kept on going for the morphine. Same kind of concept, by the way. We want to go a little further with Vietnam vets. They had that study, showed what happened when, really long story short, when the vets came home, and how many of them stayed on heroin, and how many of them quit the drug with no problem. There was very few vets that stayed that were addicted to the drug. It wasn't the drug. It was being isolated and being stressed in their environment. So they would crave it and use it, right? And then when they got home, they didn't have a problem quitting that drug. So that's a whole other, that's a huge study, basically. Same thing with cocaine and some dopamine issues there. So yeah. So yeah, sorry I skipped over that. But yeah, if you want more on the rat part, look it up and you'll see a lot more. So that's why we need connections. So Lost Connections by Johann Hari talks about that and why we get depressed. So it's loss of connection. So what happened with COVID? There's a really isolated period, right? We lost connections, we were isolated, and that has come out as some issues. So you learn from each relapse. Okay, back to changing your labels, right? Change your labels, take time to reprogram the brain. That takes time, totally. Healing the underlying cause, that's a lot of healing in past traumas, what's happened to you, what it is that you are needing, the dopamine levels, right? And the dependency is a craving for an emotion. So we have to get real smart and emotional intelligent with what emotion is lacking when we have a craving or an urge. Think about every time you have an urge, what is lacking? What are you craving? What emotion are you actually really craving? So the cure is possible. It really is through mind and body and soul, but you have to do all areas of what we've already talked about. Okay, so this is just a little quote, right? So it is possible. So addictive behaviors to cope with underlying conditions, of course, that you are now going to heal, that which is time, your dependency will cease and completely and forever. It's possible. And that's his book. Okay, so anybody not heard of the 6, which is /7 stages of change? He added one later to his model here. So this is where we go with any kind of addictive behavior. Now remember, it's not just addictive, but it's obsessive, it's repetitive, it's going through something that is replacing something else. So, and the body needs, oh, I need dopamine for this. And so the point that you have to know first is this is just denial. Pre-contemplation, complete denial. Contemplation, oh, well, within a month, I'll do something new. Maybe within a month, okay? I'm not stuck, but I'm totally stuck. And prep is like, okay, I may take action. I'm going to start learning something on how to make some changes. I'm going to pick 2 to 3 things to do a day for 10 minutes that makes a change. And you pick those, or you give yourself 4 things and you pick actually 2, and you do them for 10 minutes a day. If you're going to replace some behavior. So you want to replace something with what, your Dr. Pepper with water. So you're going to, for 10 minutes a day, make sure you're filling up your water, and you're going to replace it. You're going to get up and walk and go do something else for 10 minutes when you want to eat sugar, whatever it is, just some, simple examples. So then we're prepping. So we have to prep. Action is 1 to 3 months experimental. The other 3 months out of the 6 months of action is action. You're actually in action. You've taken time and energy. Now, this is a brain thing. This is why it is extremely difficult, because it takes that long to replace a behavior and go through to action and stay in action. Now, you can relapse, say, or it's like, oh, I can have 1 a week. Okay. So then it's like, okay, so if you have 10 in that week, you've relapsed, maybe, right? To you or to someone else. That would probably give you a relapse, right? But you just have to, there's a lot of different levels of relapse and definitions of relapse to a lot of different people. So that would be really where you work with a therapist and say, okay, this is where I'm going to be accountable to someone. I'm going to do this change, and then this change. Pick 3, but not all at once, don't have to. So 3 to 6 months is time and energy and commitment, okay? The first 3 months, your body, your mind, your energy is just going through an experimental phase to see, oh, I have some good part of dopamine. I have some good reward systems because I'm exercising for these 3 months. And then 3 to 6 months, your brain's now getting into a habit. It's now seeing the benefits. Now maintaining that new behavior is 6 months to 5 years. So, and you can relapse at any point. Statistically, you're going to slip up about 4 to 6 times through these stages, even just with one new behavior change. Okay. Anything on that? This is just another little quick handout that you can print off to be okay. So it's simple, right? Any questions on that? Like, how do you go through that? Now, accountability is great. Having someone with you on this is good. Changing behavior and changing a habit that is repetitive is super hard. You're gonna go through withdrawals, but that doesn't mean you're dependent. So with gaming, with gambling, like anything, it's like, again, taking away the cards never stopped someone from gambling. They just found a different alternative. It's not the cards. It's not the substance. It's not the drug. It's not the food. It's the compulsive behavior. Food didn't make everyone compulsive eaters. You see what I'm saying? In any kind of area, you have to go deeper and go, wait, it wasn't the food. There is some chemical imbalances in that. If you have glucose, if you have sugar issues, right? It's like, oh, or people that are craving carbs. There's a scientific reason sometimes why we crave sugar and carbs is because our body is not wanting to go through the withdrawal symptoms. So we just hit again, hit the dopamine again, hit something again, so we don't have to face the pain of whatever emotion is underlining that. So that makes sense. Because the thing is craving and the relapse and the withdrawals is, if you're craving something and you're relapsing and you're having withdrawals, it's because you want to feel calmer. So think about it. If you're doing something that makes you feel calmer, when kiddos game, it makes them feel calmer, honestly, to a point where, because it's like, and we can also talk about, shooting up or anything. So of course. Okay. So let's get to how, this is one of my favorite books. This is just an example. It's just one. Like, I'm several, but this is just one, right? So The Powerful Drug-Free Plan to Quit Your Fears and Overcome Your Anxiety, right? Which I teach the anxiety program. And there's lots of free stuff that you can go through with Blomquist that you can get into some of these things. Therapy, educational classes, support groups. So this is just a book for balance to help you, okay, how do we get to calm? So that's the point, is I want to feel calmer, but wait, here's the natural way to feel calmer. And so that's what we have to replace the behavior with. So yes, here's gaming or whatever we want to call it, or here's food, or here's this behavior. And we have to find something that says, I want to bring my dopamine down to baseline without going crazy and feeling bored and just being normally calm, because calm feels really weird and really abnormal to us, for example, right? So we have to find connection. We have to detox that dopamine habit. We have to detox it. How long does that take? 3 to 6 months, really 1 to 6 months. And then we go into maintenance of detoxing the dopamine habit. And we have to, the hard part about some of this is like food and sex, a life essential reinforcer is related to survival. If we've got some of those things going on, then we have to really go, wait, I need this to survive. I need food. I need food to survive. So it's really hard to say, oh, wait, I need to restrict food, right? So just know that. And then here's treat past events. That's all your trauma that's held in the cells of your body. If you do not believe that, go into Body Keeps a Score, the myth of normal that I already have, in here. Remember that we have power over this behavior because we just, it's not the addictive drug. It's not the cards. It's not the heroin. It's not the alcohol. I promise you that has been completely bunked of like, it's not the actual addictive power of the drug. We were told in the drug war that if you just don't take them, you won't get addicted. If you just stay away from them. That's not how this works. So emotional isolation, powerless, and stress are huge. So we look at all three of those. Make sure you're looking at your isolation, your powerless, and your stress levels. And then, of course, boundaries. So this is how we help other people the same way. So say we're helping someone that's living with us, our spouse, our kid, our grandma, or whoever. It's like, okay, you've got to have boundaries. Go to my boundaries workshops and look at the boundary parts. Do not rescue. That does not help the situation. And neither does tough love. Here's rescue and here's tough love, right? Here's persecution and here's rescuing. They don't work. In all statistics, and even in past, in other countries where they've tried some of these things, there's really a real science to how to get people out of a really bad situation. Okay, well, this is just an example of all the different names. If you have someone using marijuana illegally and you want to know, it's like, okay, I've got a kiddo living with, because that other statistic that was up earlier in the slide, a lot of people use THC illegally still too. And so here's just some names in case you want to know what we're calling it. Okay, so here's some references. Chasing the Scream, the Johan Hari is that, and Lost Connections we talked about. Dopamine Nation is a great book. It's one of the newest books on dopamine and what is going on in the brain. So really finding balance in an age of indulgence, yes. So just listen, it's a great listen to. The Myth of Normal, same by Métis. And let's see, anything else? Yeah, there's, once again, if it's just a technology thing, Watch My Technologies and Families and how we're getting hooked on that. We're together alone more than ever before. Watch that workshop on our YouTube channel. Okay, so what else is coming in? Okay, any questions or comments? Let's see. More time in the bathroom, yes. So if you're talking about when you have kiddos or so there's 3 rooms in the house, by the way, that are power rooms. When we went back to powerless, when someone is powerless, these 3 rooms will go: bathroom, bedroom, and kitchen. Food, sleep, and bathroom stuff. So people will self-harm, do stuff in the bathroom. That's where, then that's, someone brought that up, was like, okay, more time in the bathroom. Friends of mine symptoms also include sweating, yes, there's some things that you can watch for, of course, in your family that you might think, this is off, what's going on? Someone's, using something or addicted or things don't feel right. So yeah, you can, that's a whole addition to this workshop of like really just helping. Now in May, I have one scheduled that will just be about alcohol, just alcohol, and how to help your family members or how to help treat, some of those things. So that one will be coming too. So there's a 3-series part to some addiction and drugs, opiates, alcohol.
I did have a question come in. They said, if the person slips up, do they start all the way over, or is it like 2 steps forward, 1 step back?
Good question. Let's go back to the 6 stages. So when you relapse and you go all the way back, okay, to pre-contemplation, you say, screw it. That's a screw it moment, right? And you completely go back to your bad habits. Now, this is how I describe it, and we don't have very much time. So when I taught this class for, hours on end, I went through this model for, 2 hours and taught this for a 2-hour class. And so the question is, do you just lose all of that time? Say you exercise for 3 months, or my example is, someone had diabetes. She went to the doctor said you have to quit sugar. And so she cut out ice cream for 3 months, right? She really did really good, but she could have ice cream only every, couple of weeks. She would reward herself, and she would have just a small amount, enough that wouldn't shoot her sugar, right? And her dopamine clear up here. So it wasn't complete like cold turkey. So it was understanding with her nutritionist, and she cut down on her ice cream. So for 3 months, she did really good. Okay. She had an experience that was outside in her environment, and we went through the whole story, right? She went straight to pre-contemplation, went to the grocery store, bought a whole half gallon of ice cream, and ate the whole thing. Did she relapse? Absolutely. Was it a 100% fail relapse if she gets back on and says, okay, we're going to do this again for 3 months? Yes, you start over. But did she lost, and the story goes on, she lost 30 pounds in those 3 months. Like literally, she was exercising, she was eating better, she cut out ice cream, right? And she brought her blood sugar all the way into normal ranges. Did she lose all that? No. Did she gain back 30 pounds in one night? No. So it wasn't a full relapse, is what I call it, because she jumped back on, she kept her 30 pounds down, and she kept her blood sugar where it was supposed to be. She screwed up, learned from it. She went, wow, I didn't realize that I was feeding an underlining issue of this emotional environment. When this happens, I want to go. And she learned for the first time, she realized, that why she overeats or craves sugar in those moments. And then she did it again. So then, yes, we are back in action. She never made it to maintenance. So if you go to maintenance and 6 months to 5 years, you're doing this and you relapse, you start over. But remember, there's hope. Your brain has done it before. Your brain snaps back into those neurotransmitter or the neural pathways really easily again, right? Answer your question. So I think that's good.
Yeah, I think you answered it. And I didn't get any other ones besides that one. So that's it.
Well, hopefully, I know time goes by so fast, but you'll have this PowerPoint. So just look at making sure you understand, some of this, some of this chemistry of the brain and how to turn it to calm. So.
Cool. Thank you, Carol. And thank you everybody for being here, and watch for some more workshops to come out when you guys can register for them.
Thanks.
Right.
Bye.
Bye guys.